Okay, Dave. You've always contributed some of the most intriguing and original entries, and this is no exception, as I'm sure everybody could see by that last page. However, there still is a lot we could do to improve this score, and there's a lot to talk about in terms of your approach, right? So let's go over a lot of different aspects to this. I'm not going to really hugely pick it apart, but I am going to hopefully put you on the right track with a few of your stylistic approaches. Okay. Now, first of all, let's check this out. This is a way of getting the Sibelius playback engine to roll across the entire scope, the entire both hands, right? Because it's not really set up to do that. Usually, you'll have like chord in one hand, chord in the other hand, and then a roll across both, and it doesn't roll all the way. This is one way of getting Sibelius to do that. Okay. There's a lot to it, and I could get into it more, but it's okay for now. All right. Now, the other thing that is quite interesting about this page is the English horn solo. And that basically climbs all the way through the scope of the melodic line, which actually goes quite high. In many cases, we're seeing the line being traded off from instrument to instrument so that each instrument is in its most ideal register. But here you see that Dave is using, first the lower register in quite a strong way, and rightly so, because even with the English horn's better control of its low register, it still is going to want to play out quite a bit down there. So that climbs through, and then right in here we see not trading off instruments, but adding the flute as thickening. And it's still actually really good all the way up to that C sharp right up there for English horn. So right here, the way that Davis scored it, it is just adding color. The flute is adding color to the English horn part. And by the time you get to this ending part, it really becomes more about flute than about English horn, this last F sharp. But they can play together. The players just need to listen to each other and balance. So my instinct would be that the dynamics would need to be marked a bit differently for that to happen, right? Because you have forte crescendo here, so quite strong right in there, and then diminuendo to what, right? What are we diminuendoing to? So is it piano? Well, I mean, what, right? You're using a lot of forte in your on this first page. So forte English horn, forte strings. So the instruments that are carrying the melodic information have a tendency to play very strongly. And then there's also the there's the feature with playback notation, and that is that if you don't mark the part, the playback engines of whichever application you're using, say, I'd imagine this would probably be true of Dorico as well as Sibelius and Finale, it'll basically play mezzo forte, right? It'll play a middle dynamic, right? So by failing to mark these, you're basically getting that that louder sound. Okay, so so basically, to come back to this, you would have to, I think, mark a dynamic more like mezzo forte crescendo, right? And then mark both of these instruments diminuendo to piano. Now, I realize like you're trying to be really exacting with this. You've got first voice right? So like the first flute is playing this part, but the dynamic should really go underneath unless you're working with two voices on a staff, right? So since there's no second voice here, even in rests, then the dynamic should go below rather than above. Okay. All right. So nice combination here of double bass with bass clarinet. That's a very cool idea, and I see how you're kind of avoiding dynamic mixing for the most part. You've got the harp scored up, and you've got your background texture here, the your flowing strings here. So I would really recommend here, like, not scoring a slur over these articulations, right? Now, and I don't think you need a I think that this is kind of the opposite of what you want right here. Adding a tenuto mark to the last note of a group of slurred notes. I think that that is a mistake, because it's, you're asking for this to be a long full note right at the end, whereas that kind of messes with the string player's ability to group notes, right? They want to be able to lift from the end of a slur and then play into the next one, right? And maybe that was added to get a particular kind of a sound out of your playback engine. I'm assuming this is Dorico. It looks like a Dorico score to me, or maybe it is Sibelius. A lot of scores are starting to look like each other as as different house styles are being shared around. But if you really want, I think that really what you really wanted here was emphasis on this third beat, right? So that should have its own down bow. It should have its own beat, right? Or sorry, it should have its own bow, maybe up bow. So I would say probably you would want to divide this into down and up, right? So da, 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 right? Because the way you've got it right now is all the player could do here is just add a little bit more oomph with the bow, right? So the way that you've got it scored, if they were to follow this, they'd have to go da, they're just shoving a little bit harder with the bow on this note, and it's just almost meaningless, right? So it would be better for you to break this apart, right? So slur, slur, and get rid of the tenuto mark, because it doesn't really mean anything. Okay. All right. So this is very cool, though, this idea of texture behind the English horn. And here's the fun thing, is you could actually just mark the English horn piano solo, right? And then in a real-life situation, you would get exactly what you want here. The English horn player would play out, you just give them the nuances, the little hairpins, and then it's much, much easier for the flute to come in here off of a piano crescendo, and you can just make them match in terms of dynamics, and it'll sound perfect going into the end here. It's kind of cool the way that you overlap here on your melody, jumping into the next passage, and the way that you hold off on the strings until this part right here. Really, really like it a lot. Okay, so I think that this is really nicely balanced at the beginning. I don't think that there's any problems here. You don't have to drop the horns down to triple P or the trombones or whatever. They will be soft enough. And I really like the idea that you're using cornets here instead of trumpets. So the second part right in here, it's going to be all right, except I think it's going to really, you might want to think about lightening the bass in certain parts like this, because it's really going to be heavy, like the kind of these long notes in in double bass and in bass clarinet and contrabassoon. It's kind of interesting that you've got this little rest right in here. Like, I mean, I don't know why you would need to rest there, because the bassist can change directions. It doesn't really matter. They don't need to breathe right in there. You know who needs to breathe are these people up here who actually literally are using their breath, right? But even here you wouldn't really need that, because the piece is fast enough, as you've marked it at 120. It's fast enough so that that they don't really need to take a breath at all, because they've got places that they can breathe anyhow. Now, if you just kind of wanted the sound of the double bass to sort of disappear under the winds, that's one thing, but honestly, what your mock-up is showing you is pretty much what is going to happen in concert, and that is that it doesn't really matter, right? So might as well just have everybody be the same length, right? So they can sync up. Okay, and as I mentioned before, there are no dynamics marked here, so probably what you got from your playback engine was a mezzo forte. But that sort of messes you up, because you want your playback to be uniform, right? So your contrabassoon might be sounding 3 times as loud as your bass clarinet, right? So just watch out for those things. Try to mark all your dynamics and entrances, all right? Okay. And you've got your nice violas and cellos here. That's very, very cool idea. And as I've suggested with other scores, think about breaking things up so that they're nicer to bow, right? Because like now, what you've got here under one bow is da da, right? We're sort of missing the harmony right in here. Da. How about da 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 da, or da da, or even da 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 da? All every single note bowed with a separate bow stroke. So so just remember, for the most part, you did break down the slurring, right? So, but just watch out with strings. Now we've got bump, 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 bum, and clarinets, flutes, bassoons, plus staccato middle strings. Okay, so the problem here, Dave, is that you left out the resolution, right? There's a little resolution here. Bump, 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 right? There's in almost all of these phrases, she has a little resolution at the end. So maybe you found it kind of boring, or it was just an element that was maybe too obvious for your thinking or something. So I was thinking maybe reasons for it to be intentionally left out, but maybe you just missed that, right? But there was a resolution that I feel is missing here, right? Now this is kind of interesting that you've got you've got a lot of weight on the beginning, right? And then you basically just add, you sort of transport the middle harmonization up here so that it matches the flutes, and it's the same. It's basically an echo with the same notes on it. Here, right, we're missing the sound of the seconds, of the firsts doubling the flutes. So, it does work. It's kind of a nice way to score an echo where, it isn't the same, but it is similar, right? So, that's all pretty cool. And that will work fine, as we heard. I think you could go all the way down to piano here instead of just mezzo piano, which sort of seems, mezzo piano, because what do you follow it with? Mezzo forte, right? So you really need more of a contrast here. You could have gone all the way down to pianissimo for all I care, but I think mezzo piano is just not that much of a gap, right? And then you need to mark the other parts, right? So is this still going to be whatever it is, forte, piano, whatever, you know? I don't think it supports very well if this part here is loud and then continuing on the same dynamic in the basses, and I guess this is probably intended to be piano as well, right? So the bass part has got to match dynamically with the rest of the orchestra. But very cool first screen here. Let's take a look at the next one. Okay, bum 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 bum. Yeah, so forte. Yeah, I guess I forgot that when I was studying over your score, preparing it for the evaluation. But I mean, I still think you could have brought it down to piano, the previous bars. Okay. So do we really want this approach here with our breath and our bowing? Bum bum bum. You know, bow, down, up, down. I mean, I guess it works. You know, it kind of takes away a little bit of the drive, if you know what I mean, of that, you know, of the first bar when it's slurred like that. But it still works better than just throwing a big line, or excuse me, a big slur over everything. So here we've got the octaves in the upper strings, and then some harmonization from the cello, and then harmonization in your oboe family, and then horns below, and along with trombones, and then here we've got like first cornet on top. Right, and then you know here I don't even think you need to. I mean, you're being really great about it. I would say, like, you know, first then marking this, and then second below. Yeah, and then you've got two voices there. Yeah, you know, it's actually your two voice writing is great. I was about to critique it, but it's fine. I would actually have the you know, I might have the third come in here rather than the fourth, but it's just, you know, that's a very small point. Okay, so I don't really see any big problems with this, except that, you know, I mean, do you want that sound? Is what I would ask you. You know, the mock-up is actually somewhat accurate in showing you that it's going to be kind of a more, not really nasal, I hate that word, it's such a cop-out, I feel like. It's, you know, the first person, you know, 100 years ago somebody was writing an orchestration manual and used the word nasal, and then everybody imitated it after that. You know, and it's just too obvious of a thing to say about a texture that has a lot of double reeds in it. It's going to be very bright and edgy the way that you've got it scored, and especially with cornet as the top voice, right? Like playing inside the octaves of the violin, and like and then right in here, like there's no support. There's, you know, there's no support for that top line of the violins, right? So they are not going to be as brilliant as they could be, right? You've got your F sharp, your middle voice right in here of this triple octave is supported by first oboe, you know, but the brightness of the cornet right in here is going to mess with the flow, with the brightness, with the projection of the first violin. So I think here's a place where you really could have used maybe some support from flute. All right, going on. Okay, so there's a comment I just want to make about this entire page here, Dave, and that is that it's, right now what you got for this screen is you've got a sketch, right? Like the previous page I felt was a complete orchestration, right? And then the ending of this piece is a complete orchestration. But I feel that this screen right here is more of a sketch because it really uses the same approach all the way through, right? There's really kind of no change. It's the same basic, the same roles for all the instruments. So there's no contrast. And so what that means is that the different phrasing from the original music, which is very keenly contrasted, and there are episodes and everything else in the piano score where Lili uses just the natural colors of the piano and the phrasing to say different things, right? But the problem here is that when the approach is homogeneous throughout, up here to B, then it's hard to get a sense of the differentiation of those phrases, right? Of the sense of interplay between the different episodes, between the different statements, right? So it robs the music of some meaning. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to be really. I know that sort of sounds really harsh, and I don't intend it to be like that at all, because you've got some great instincts as an orchestrator and some great colors and great ideas, right? But I feel like here, like some contrast in the approach would have really really helped, right? Even if it were just to bring like maybe these 4 bars down, bum 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 bum, or even 2 bars, right? Like if this had just been like, what if, okay, everything here scored the way that it is, fine, okay, and then you got here, what if it were just brass for a second? Bum 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 bum, and then the orchestra comes back in, yada da 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 bum bum, right? So that's just basically the watch out for the power of the orchestra to subvert the meaning of the original information, right? As well as, not just to transmogrify and exalt and everything else, but also, without variation and contrast, then we might not hear the meaning of the music, right? But yeah, like, having said that, though, I will say that there's nothing really all that wrong with the orchestration as it is, except that right in here, in this part right here, we're kind of lacking the bass function in the original score, and you can really feel that kind of dropout, right? There are some instruments that are playing some of the bass, some of the lower notes, but there really isn't like the actual bass of the original score doesn't seem to be present right in here, and that also kind of hurts the music a little bit, right? But to analyze what is going on here, we've got octaves, we've got sort of an octave transcription here going through here in the upper strings. We've got some harmonic components here in the middle strings, and then from below we've got, once again, the oboe taking that lower line, and then the English horn adding another octave below that, right? So that sort of represents our big triple octave once again, along with some cornet right in here, that is also supplying, is also sort of beefing that up a little bit. Okay, and then like horns and trombones, once again supplying like the harmony. So yeah, so it all pretty much works, and so on. I would probably temper like I would want to subdue some of this harmonic support in here from the brass from getting to be too loud, because it will really stomp all over the winds right in here. Strings, middle strings are also going to be hurt, like not the upper strings, obviously. They're going to stand out. But once again, this kind of writing, the upper voice has no support to it. The has no doubling. There's tons of doubling on this middle voice right in here of the triple octave, but there isn't any doubling for the top voice, and I think that would hurt it. Just it would be this. You would hear the strings on top, but and also not even just in terms of strength, but in terms of the mellowing that happens when the sort of transformation of the tone that happens when you are doubling winds and strings together in kind of unifying them in a line. You also get a certain kind of strength and color that is necessary for this kind of tutti writing, right, or mild tutti writing. So so those are my comments on it. So it's and right by the time we get to here, it really when you're really pushing this, it's really beautiful the way that you've got this. But I just really feel it'll be hard to. It's the strings and winds are not going to balance out with the brass. Okay, now here, what you need is a little pausa, like a little apostrophe mark over, bum bum resolution, right? There just needs to be a little breath right in here. That's probably what I would add if I were conducting this, right? So you might as well put it in yourself, right? So just a little comma right before each of these notes in those parts. All right, now continuing on, we come back to our opening melody, ba-da-da-dum. Right in here, we've got some doubling, flute doubling the upper line, but like no doubling below. All right. Let's turn the page to the next screen. Da-dum. And this was really, really cool. I mean, I can see why you are kind of easing off on doubling the lower line when you have got this kind of call and response kind of imitation going on in here. But, here you are supporting both the viola and cello by doubling, right? Why does the lower line down here not get too much support? I mean, still, yeah. I mean, you don't want to stomp on what's going on, like when the violas come in there. But still, I mean, here's a place where I would say, yeah, go ahead and use the second flute, because it will not get in the way of the oboe, because it's just intentionally, it's kind of softer, but it will support a little bit, and it is going into the middle register rather than just the lower register. So here's where I would say, yeah, okay, go ahead and use second flute, as doubling for the second violins. And this is really nice. I really like the harmonization right in here. Very, very simple, of clarinet and bass clarinet and second bassoon. It's really nice. If one thing I would say, if there was any way of making the bass have more life in here, right? That's what, because it just feels kind of static, right? It just kind of I feel like there's a loss of momentum when there isn't any when the bass function is I don't know if random is the right word, but it just seems to be subdued. That might be a better way of putting it. And it's basically because of this sort of drone here in the second bassoon, right, as opposed to the ones and fives here in the double bass. All right, horns coming in and pushing into this big, bright, beautiful, balanced part right in here. See, look, mezzo forte, that works great. Like you could have used this in some previous passages, right? Just backing off on the brass a little bit, so that what was going on in the winds and strings would be bright enough and strong enough, right? Okay, so cup mute. Now, I have worked with brass players before, and I know that sometimes people can hang mutes. They're like a little strap or something, but I'm not so sure that you can slam a cup mute into a cornet or onto the end of a trombone that quickly. All right, I just seems a little dubious there. Okay, now you do not have to write LV or let vibrate on harp parts. That is just the general, that's just the general thing. What you should do is just put a slur mark over it, right? And then just have this tie to the next, like maybe have the same notes tied in the next bar, right? And you'll get the same exact effect. You do not have to mark LV unless, I would say if the harpist was like playing one chord and then you just wanted to kind of hang in the air for a long, long time. But the thing about it is that you really, you are so heavily textured here, even with soft dynamics, that the harp, nobody's going to hear that from the harp anyway, right? If there was some subtle effect, and that's not what you're writing. You are just interpreting the melody. Bum, 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 bum. Right. Now here you're going really slow. I feel that this is just a little too slow for the flow of the music. Okay. But okay, so here I think that you forgot something. Like I don't think that this is that this was an intentional mistake. Here you're interpreting the harmony going behind this beautiful interpretation of the melody, which is really nice. And you got like piccolo on top, and then clarinet below that, and bass clarinet, bassoons, and so on. Contrabassoon, kind of an interesting thing, and then first cornet and harp. Pretty heavily textured. I would say pianissimo, right? If these people are pianissimo, your cornets and your trombones should damn well be softer than them. All right, but the big point is this. You've got this beautiful harmony right in here, okay? And then it got left out. Like I'm seeing some blank bars here, right? So I think that you forgot to put it in because like there is no harmonic support to the melodies anywhere else, right? And then, okay, so all I would say about this section right in here is that it's like your first 4 bars are beautifully devised, okay? And I think that they work fine. But I feel that you should have tried to go for some variety here because, once again, just like the previous screen, it's the same approach just going on with each passing phrase. And so pretty much 4 phrases in a row. Or is it 5? Anyhow, the music pretty much flows as it did before. I'm not too convinced by this change of direction. I feel that I understand why you're doing it because you don't want the flow of the music to get too low for certain instruments, like to go out of range. So, for instance, for the oboes, right in here. But I still feel that it's distracting, right? I think it's better just to have all of the have the flow of the music just go continuously in one direction, and then right here at the end it's just so beautifully done. It works so nicely, and the way that you reinterpreted the music, basically recomposed the music, was just exceptional. I mean, this is one of the standout moments for me in this evaluation process. I'm just like looking at how one or another phrase was interpreted. This is just really among the best. And I just really love the way that you've got all of these scored. The touch 5 harmonic right in here, that's totally fine. A touch 4 with the upper strings and just this nice floating, soft kind of background. And the way you balanced all of your instruments, that is all top notch. So, yeah, I mean, that's really all I have to say about this. I just feel it's just a great, despite my critiques of some previous things and some things that I think you left out by accident, like the harmonization of behind the melody here with the strings. Despite all of that, I think this was just really one of your best, if not your best entry ever, Dave. And just really seeing you grow as an orchestrator, and you're just scoring with more and more confidence, and and obviously like listening, the inner voice is just becoming really powerful in your works and so on, and just so many great personal touches. I like the cornets here, and the way that you are scoring using your clarinets and everything else. I mean, you're just really wonderful, just wonderful ideas. So I just, thank you once again for your support over the years, and like your entries. You're just fascinating entries to these orchestration challenges, and just like real appreciation here. Please enter the next one, and whichever one we ever have. You're always welcome to have your ingenious ideas put to work on these challenges. Thanks so much.